Hi, everyone. Um, this is Craig Rosenberg back again. My brief intro of myself is I am known to some as the funnelholic. I like to write, talk, and study the sales and marketing. Well, you can call it the funnel, we can call it a chain, we can call it a organization, whatever that might be. I love it, breathe it, and I'm very excited to be a part of the content project that we're working on today. I'm working with Lattice engines to put together content um, around a guide for CMOs and VPs of marketing for technology. And so, what we've done is we've reached out to a number of thought leaders in the space. We've started with a number of folks to talk about sort of the platform. We're talking about marketing operations. We're talking about a number of things. But when we talk about kind of how CMOs should think about strategy and how they should, how their frame of view should start to change. The guy we needed to talk to was Adam Needles. And the other reason why we really wanted Adam is he talks to CMOs and VPs of marketing every day. So this isn't just an academic who wrote a book, right? This is all of the things that Adam likes to talk about and is great at talking about comes from the fact that he talks to CMOs and VPs of marketing. So that's why he's here today. So, Adam, thanks for being here today. If you don't mind, before we kick off, if you could just spend a minute talking about yourself and your background.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys here today. Just a quick background on me. I'm passionate about B2B marketing and passionate about demand generation. I'm really passionate about helping B2B marketing leaders think differently about what they're doing. We see a lot of change today, which we'll talk about obviously in the B2B marketing arena, particularly at a strategy and process level. But that's what I'm really passionate about. I do that today. I'm the chief strategy officer and a partner in the business with Annuitas, which is a demand generation change management firm. We work with our clients, really help them build their demand process architecture out to really think through their blueprint, design of their programs, and to really make sure they've got the right grounding before they tap into things like, well, what should my organization look like, or what marketing technology should I have to support this process? So that's what I do for a living. As you said earlier, I did in fact write a book called Balancing the Demand Equation. It's available on Amazon. I say that half jokingly, half seriously, in a sense that I really felt like the book did not exist out there to help us really understand what's going on in demand gen, what's going on with the buyer today, and so I put it all in a book and recommend it. And I'm sure Craig that uh, I'm sure that for your viewers here that there's a wealth of knowledge I think that they could really benefit from in terms of case studies, other things that are in the book today. So that's a quick background on me. Not the most eloquent, but gives you an intro to what I'm all about.
Terrific. Okay, so let's get going here. I just want to give everyone the background when you and I decided on kind of what we were going to talk about. I came to you and gave you the
Sure.
whole premise behind the book, and you said, "Well, wait, man, you're missing like the most important thing." And
Right.
I think that's something that's really interesting in talking to a lot of you guys who work with a lot of marketing leadership folks is you guys are all technology guys, right? You came from, I mean, you were at Silverpop. I mean, you implement marketing automation, you talk to people about technology. But when you guys talk about everything, you rarely talk about the technology. That kind of plays in. And so what made me really, this is perfect for what we're trying to talk about today because we want to make CMOs and VPs of marketing as successful as we possibly can. And you basically said, well, let's talk. But boy, I think there's some big issues that I'd like to talk about that you're missing. Did
Right.
I get that right?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. So, it's interesting for me. I was a VP of marketing. I was a CMO for nearly 5 years for an industry analyst firm, and then I kind of took a little bit of a reset and went back and spent some time doing some research. Went to work with Silverpop, leading their demand gen evangelism. And for me, it was really sort of searching, a little bit of a soul searching to say, okay, I knew things were changing in B2B marketing, knew something was going on, but I needed to understand what was underneath it. And technology is absolutely critical to what's going on today. Let's be 100% clear. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the fundamental changes that are underlying, and we're going to talk about some of the process evolution that needs to occur. But the truth is that technology is, in fact, a key catalyst in the change we're seeing, right? And the big change we're seeing more than ever is that we can no longer have an inside out type of marketing. We can no longer have an approach where we go to someone and try to sell them on a product or solution that we're trying to offer as a B2B marketing and sales organization. More than ever, what's happened is in a Web 2.0 environment, the same internet that enables us to reach people one-to-one and to scale our marketing also has really created a problem for us as B2B marketers because it's made our buyers a lot more powerful
Yeah.
and has really shifted a lot of power to those buyers. And so, a lot of people talk about this, but, really getting down to the nuts and bolts of it, the big change is that today we have to really understand and think about our B2B marketing in a different way. Good B2B marketing, good any kind of marketing, consumer market, et cetera, has always been driven by customer insights, by consumer and B2B buyer insights. But this is a fundamental reorg because if you look at it and say, okay, a buyer has so many different channels that they can go out and reach out to find information. They have all these peer interactions that they can access today through social media, through online ratings, through all kinds of different channels. And you look at and realize that the buyers of our products and services contribute 5, 10, 15, 20 times more content than we as companies, corporations are able to contribute today. You start to realize that, okay, if we're going to be successful at engaging with this buyer, at starting to build a relationship, we have to recognize that the fundamental buying process, the fundamental content consumption pattern that this buyer goes through in order to make a decision or identify a product or solution that they want has absolutely changed. And that's where we've got to realize that B2B marketing's got to be designed in a different way. That today, when you talk about engaging with someone, I mean, it's a no-brainer we're going to have multiple touch points. It's a no-brainer that the internet's going to be involved. But what I think a lot of B2B marketers still miss is that the fundamental design of your B2B marketing, of your demand generation today, and of rationalizing the roles of marketing and sales and the content that we put out there has to be patterned on how is your buyer going to go out there and seek a solution to a pain point. What are the questions and issues that they're going to move through as they go through that process of understanding what might be out there. And you have to fundamentally pattern your marketing and build it bottoms up with this sense of this digital dialogue that you're going to have with the buyer, with this relationship building that's going to occur through digital channels. And that fundamental construct, which is way more than just customer or buyer insight, the fundamental redesign of B2B marketing demand generation, that's really groundbreaking for a lot of B2B marketing sales and B2B marketing and sales leaders today.
Okay, so this is always I love this train of thought, and I know that you guys are big on this. And but help me, like with what you just said. I mean, what do I go do? Like what, you know what I mean? Like, is this
Right,
really, is this time? I'm spending time doing an analysis. What am I looking for? How am I trying to, all the things that you just said, how do I get
right.
there? I mean, that's always been really interesting to me because I totally, obviously, totally agree, and I love how you talk about this. But I'm just trying to set the table for what how you can go do this as a CMO. So I'm a CMO, and I'm going to go build a marketing platform, right? You're saying this isn't just about demand gen. This isn't just about technology. This is how you go and run your company. So
Right.
how do just tell me a little bit about how I go do this? Like, what are my steps here?
Yeah, so think about a couple things. So let me talk about this from a strategic level, and then let me
Yeah,
talk about it from
please. Yeah.
a more of a tactical level. The strategic implication is that your demand generation, your engagement, these digital dialogue threads that are going to occur with each individual buyer, um, those are now, in fact, no longer a tactical consideration. So it used to be an after effect, right? We were like, okay, we have this product or service we're going to take to market. How do we connect with people? Okay, we'll shift that and say, okay, yes, we have this product or the service that we want to offer, but it's a solution to a problem. We need to have thought through that problem remediation process that a buyer is going to go through. And so what that means is that instead of demand generation being a tactical activity to, go find a name for someone, the salesperson is going to call or what have you, it literally becomes a strategic activity where you talk about all of your marketing and sales interactions have to be built around this and orchestrated around this dialogue that you want to drive. And so when you think about your total go-to-market, you think about your different segments, the major product or service swim lanes, they then become divided up by these individual dialogues. So within a given solution that you're selling, you have to think about each individual persona and their interactions at different stages, and you need to construct out something that obviously is no longer a one and done, a one-off type of interaction. It's a series of conversations that start and end at different points and that are going to bring them to a purchase. So how do you actually, so that's the sort of strategic view of that. How do you make that happen? Well, let's be clear. The first step is you have to go out and say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to sell? What is it a solution to for my buyer, and what were those original pain points? And you need to think, we talk at Annuities about this concept of you need to engage, nurture, and convert. So you need to start by saying that initial engagement needs to be not haphazard. It needs to be purposeful. So you really want to look at it and say, what are those pain points that cause someone to get off the fence and to launch themselves into a buying process, right? And instead of just, people go out there and they're like, well, let's create all these themes and topics and whatever, and they're just all over the place, but they're not really focusing on the core insight of what is it that was the pain point that caused the buyer to really go down this process, right? That's what all of your engagement content should be about. And that engagement content should sit where buyers are going to go look for it. Different audiences look in different ways. There's some audiences that respond well to e-newsletters. There are others that respond well to and prefer to go out and search for things. There's some that are going to respond to social stimulus, right? And it's never one thing. It's always a package. So you want to think about a portfolio of inbound and outbound placements of content related to these pain points that's going to drive initial engagement. And then you want to look at and say, okay, once I understand what those initial pain points are, what are the subsequent questions? What are the sort of transformations that someone has to go through? If they start with the pain point, how do they then look at the broader set of implications? How do they cause that to then look internally and assess what their needs are? How do they map that to what might be available in the marketplace? How do they eventually map that to your specific product or service? And how do you then position that and help them do a better assessment of whether you're going to be a right fit, and then eventually to justify that purchase for them? So you have to think about all of those different stages. For us, helping clients go through that process, the first step is the core buying process, but then rapidly we're layering in what we call content offers. So what are those interactions, again, whether inbound or outbound, they're going to drive that dialogue. And then when does that jump over and start to become a sales conversation, right? This question that comes up over and over again about when should a qualified lead go to sales? Well, with Buyer 2.0, the question is, when does a buyer want to talk to a salesperson? When is it the right time? And when is it the point where you're going to go from content offers delivered digitally to sales education steps that are going to be delivered via your sales team? So it's all about creating that keel of the dialogue thread, the buying process, layering in the content offers, layering in the sales education steps. And then once you have all of that, then you can start to say, so how do I qualify a buyer? As they move through these stages of their buying process, how do I impose a funnel on that enables me to look at and say, how do I differentiate between a prospect and someone who's engaged? How do I differentiate between someone who's engaged with my content but who's actually qualified and meets my criteria for an ideal buyer? How do I look among those qualified, engaged buyers and then say which ones are actually a qualified lead because it's the right place, the right time? What are those steps you need to layer in? And then once you have all of that together, now you're starting to look at and say, okay, I have these granular interactions, I have these granular qual stages. Now you have something that you can actually automate. Now you have something you can actually build and staff your team around. Now you should be talking about things like marketing automation and involving that. But it's going through that process, and it may seem as though it's a lot of work, but the other piece of this in getting to a demand process, getting to this perpetual point of view and enabling a buying process is that you're setting something up that is going to be able to capture any buyer at any moment who's actually ready to go through this and move them through the stages. And that's no longer some time-bound, campaign. That's not your Q1 campaign. Now we're talking about something that's an always-on program that can move, at a buyer's pace when a buyer's ready to go. And so while there's a lot of time and work that goes into laying that keel, what the result is that you actually have something that is evergreen and that you're going to drive and tune and refine on a perpetual basis over a longer period of time. And that changes the dynamics of marketing ROI. Traditionally, we've looked at, hey, we run this 6-week program, and then what's the result, and we're trying to look at a one-to-one, but we never paid attention to the buyer when it was the right time for them. In this new posture, we're actually able to invest in something that certainly takes a lot up front, but actually is going to play out over not just months or quarters, but actually over years. And it's something that we're going to continue to refine. All of this starts to look a lot like a process. And this is really where we're going. I talk about in the book, there's really two big things we need to be doing today. We need to understand and focus on our buyers, but we need to learn how to operationalize that engagement with them. And so this whole transformation, I'm trying to kind of break it down in some steps and get more tactical about it. Starts with that buyer, but then moves to something that actually is a process that you can run, that you can refine, that you can improve on. And that's whenever things actually start to get cool, because then you actually have something that you can look at, measure, understand, see the buying process, see a closed loop, start to analyze it. And by the way, that for us is first stage of basic demand gen maturity. Getting to that closed loop process, getting to closed loop systems,
Hmm.
that's when you actually have something that you can do. And then higher levels of being able to get to better marketing ROI, more predictable leads, more predictable pipeline. It all is based on this core concept that I'm talking about. And by the way, this isn't just a B2B thing. I mean, we need to think about this also in the consumer arena. It's a similar type of trend, albeit a little bit shorter buying cycles, not so much the complex sale. But
Yeah.
when we talk about this in a broader sense for CMOs, whether it be for B2B or B2C, it all has to start with the buyer, has to start with the dialogue we want to have with the buyer. Everything has to be built on that. That's the new foundation. That's why I said we need this outside in, not inside out style and strategy of designing marketing today.
All right. Well, when you say this, I actually feel weird asking you this because I don't believe this is true. But, I have heard from others where they say, well, this is, everything you're talking about is about demand generation. And when I hear you talk, that's true, right? There's a lot of elements we're talking about here about that are strictly related to just demand generation. But whenever you've talked and whenever you've set the table like you just had, for me, it's actually about all things marketing, right? I mean,
Right.
essentially, the what you're this is relevant for setting the table for your entire marketing platform, right? Or
Yes.
am I wrong?
We're talking
Is
about
everything
moving
about
from,
demand?
yeah. Well, it is. Okay, so let's get basic microeconomics, right? Companies, supply and demand, right? That's the two things. Companies are really good at supply. They have really good systems like our ERP for managing holistic supply chain. They're really bad in the modern environment at demand and managing demand chain. So yes, everything is about demand. We're moving beyond lead gen, which is just capture name, to a strategic demand gen, which is an end-to-end interaction. And actually, what we're talking about creating is something we talk about Nuitus with our clients about, this concept of a demand process, which is this end-to-end type of an interaction, which aggregates and brings together marketing and sales. And that's the level that you've got to get to, because it's really, if the stuff's going to be successful, it's about taking a buyer from initial interest to lifetime revenue, right? And to do that, you have to orchestrate sales and marketing resources. And so it really is a demand process that you're trying to create and manage. And when you talk about managing that demand process, it's not just one system. It's not just marketing automation. It's not just CRM. It's not just your website or an inbound marketing platform. It's orchestrating all of those digital and live interactions throughout the entire process. So again, you're right. I mean, whenever I talk about, I think a lot of people have this tactical view of demand gen, and they're really thinking about lead gen. But come on, guys, get with it. Like, that's like 20 or 30 years ago. That's the salesperson, or sorry, the marketing person who's really just a sales enablement person doing brochures. We're not there anymore. If a marketer, if a CMO is going to be successful in the modern era, driving successful B2B marketing programs, that marketer has got to be driving strategic demand gen, and demand process has got to be the fundamental core of everything that they do in their marketing and sales programs.
That is that's a great answer. Um, it's always amazing when I talk to you. It feels so heavy, yet when you really sort of metabolize what you're saying, it's really makes so much sense, and that's why I really appreciate this. So, are is I kind of wrote this question down. As you were talking. So the key to future marketing success is essentially reimagining how we are constructing marketing and sales campaigns or programs or whatever that we're doing today. You mentioned always on, and I'd love to that kind of goes hand in hand with what I'm asking. And you also have this bottoms up view, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know if it's a question, more of a recap, but I'd love for you to just continue to expand on that. So, are we as a result of all the things that we're doing, we're reimagining our approach to our programs. And well, why
Right.
don't we start with that, and then we can talk a little bit more about the bottoms up
Well, so
view
let
and
me
how
give you
that
an
changed
example. So let
everything.
me take the technology view for a second. So let's say someone implements marketing automation, or they're building a large data warehouse for their marketing. Too many companies try to take this top-down view and try to have some global singular brand or some global approach. The one that's most laughable is when a billion-dollar plus company, wants to have a single scoring model that everything is going to go through. It just doesn't work, right? And why is that? It's because you have diverse constituencies you interact with. Different types of buyers have different pain points, have different things on their mind, different channels they want to engage through. And so this concept of constructing your demand process bottoms up literally looks at and says, let's consider those constituencies. Let's consider those individual buyers. Let's consider the pain points they have, the processes they go through, the content consumption patterns that they're going to pursue. And when we make decisions about, hey, what are we doing with search? What are we doing with our website? What are we doing with social media? What are we doing with e-newsletters? What are we doing with nurturing emails, right? It's no longer a macro question for the company. It's no longer some sort of a policy initiative. It's, well, what's the right thing for each individual buying audience, right? And so that bottoms up view starts to look at and say, the total of all of your website strategy, all your nurture strategy, your scoring, everything is actually no longer about a total macro view, right? It's actually taking the bottoms up and saying, what are all our needs in different segments, and then having this federated view, right? So when we work with clients, for instance, on lead scoring, right? Lead scoring is one of these things that is an embedded critical piece. It's a demand process integration piece, right? It requires already knowing your buyer, your qual steps. It's a technical thing, right? We talk about this importance that you should have macro qualification standards. You should have macro scoring thresholds in terms of the numbers. You should have macro lead qualification stages, because that helps to organize things in total. But your requirements for the questions and things that you might ask, for instance, what goes on a web form, right? Well, your web form, your initial engagement web forms on a landing page, they should have consistent standards. But for different solutions areas, for different buyers, you may ask slightly different questions. You may interpret and have slightly different application of those standards. So when we're talking about bottoms up, right? So I think it can be very tangible when you talk about something like a lead scoring model, that your total approach is going to be a federated model. And then when we think about big picture things like where we're spending our budget on our website, around nurturing, around outbound email, etc., the whole picture should all be about the individual needs for the individual buying segment. And I'm hoping that helps to clarify a little bit, Craig, but that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a bottoms up view.
That's all. That's perfect. And you mentioned something that I was hoping to ask you, and I've been trying to ask all the guys is, well, so we have, you're espousing these amazing things, and then there's the person that's sitting in the seat trying to execute
Right.
this. So do we? You talked about change in design. I don't know if you want to talk more about that, but changing in budgeting and how
Sure.
you mobilize the organization to be successful here. I wonder if you could comment on that for a minute.
Well, so I think if I'm a CMO, if the things that I'm saying right now are resonating with you, if you're looking at saying, wow, I really do have some challenges, there's some new paradigms, there's some new things I need to be doing. Um, your next question is going to be, how do I drive this change? And I will say for some organizations, um, some initial top-down auditing and work is appropriate. But we actually see a little bit more commonly that what makes the most sense is to actually take your transformation and drive that bottoms up, right? Take the fact when we're looking at saying that we want to start to build your demand process bottoms up, sometimes the easiest starting point and the best way to prove out some of the new processes and qualification approaches is to actually take an individual segment where you've got an example, you've got a specific buyer, specific solution area, and actually running it through. So taking, here's one piece of our business. We're $1 billion company, but here's $100 million portfolio that we have a definable set of buyers, couple major points of interaction and channels. We've got a direct sales force, we've got some indirect, we've got some very discrete challenges, and you use that and say, let's start there. Let's actually make this the prototype for what we want our whole organization to look like. We want the federated view to eventually look like. But let's start there and make that our initial attempt. And we find that the pilot approach, some of our best, some of the clients I've had the best interactions with and people that have won awards for their approaches to their demand center, which, a demand center of excellence is one of those things that actually is a macro thing. It's the org and the set of processes in total. Some of the best examples of a demand generation center of excellence actually started as bottoms-up programs where we did and piloted one program, then another one, and then another one. Then you started to think about the overall governance, started to think about the federated models, started to think about how you're going to articulate the larger view of the process and of the organization and the technology. So from my standpoint, I would say to any CMO, there's some big changes that have to occur out there. But if you're trying to do it in tactical pieces and you're just saying, oh, well, let's change our website, or let's change how we do email, or let's change some specific area, let's change how we do events, it's not going to work that way. You've got to take an end-to-end lead to revenue process, a pain point to solution arc, and you've got to play it all the way through, and you've got to integrate. Because really the secret sauce in all of this is actually not about an individual change to a tactic or better using market automation. The real secret sauce in this is that this is about orchestrating a series of interactions and channels and automated live interactions. And it's really the accumulation, the integration, the orchestration of all of that, making it work together, that actually winds up becoming the driving the execution of that demand process. Because let's be honest, no purchase, no buyer, no interaction with the customer today. Nobody has one and done interactions. If you sell something that's in the $1 million plus range, a complex sale, frankly, anything over $1,000, there's a lot of points of interaction. You have a lot to orchestrate. You got to prove that out in one specific area, make that your pet project for the year, for the next 18 months, and then make that the foundation for how you're going to re-architect all of your sales and marketing.
So tell me about when you talk to CMOs and VPs of marketing about this. Uh, what are they fearful of, and how do you help them go over the top? I'm wondering, and I want this for when people either read or listen to this, and they
Yep.
say you're gonna. I mean, I'm sure there's common things that you hear, and then what are those, and then how do you talk people through that?
So, a couple things. First of all, we're changing the frame of marketing investment. We're saying that the quarterly campaigns, the branding initiatives, they don't work. You need to be always on. You need to be getting found. You need to be ready to move when a buyer's ready to move. That's a big change, right? Um, we're saying that your interaction with sales and marketing has got to change. And by the way, sales rules have to change, right? If a sales job is still about just the transaction or order taking, it's not going to be beneficial, right? Salespeople actually have to take their game to the next level in the same way that marketers do. Um, they're nervous about multi-touch. They don't really understand that. They don't understand how to drive that process, right? They're still wanting to think about these very basic metrics like cost per lead and initial source,
Yeah,
and those are things that really don't provide a lot of fruit, right? Again, if you go back to the engage, nurture, convert, your initial source is your engagement source, but you might have all these other touches that are nurtures, and actually to get from point A to point B, you need all of those touches. So you can't really isolate one source anymore, right? So there's some big changes in terms of how they're going to organize and plan and budget for marketing. One of the other big changes is that there's going to be significant reorganization or re-rationalization of their marketing staff, and everybody is going to be CYA. I mean, I've seen some really bad behavior inside transformation organizations where companies are going through the change where everybody's blaming everyone. The consultant gets blamed, right? Um, and really what's happening is that you're saying, hey, you know what? There's some jobs in marketing that don't make a whole lot of sense in the new era, and there's some new roles that need to be there that aren't there. And by the way, we need to rationalize what role people play. Field marketing is a great example, right? Is field marketing top of funnel, awareness and initial engagement? Are they doing events, or is it close in sales support? I'm not advocating for either one, but I'm saying in a demand process, you need to know what part of the funnel that an organization within the marketing team is functioning and what is their discrete role in driving that demand process forward. The last piece of this is technology. I'm not going to lie. I absolutely believe that you've got to have world-class CRM, marketing automation. You've got to have flexible, agile CMS today in your websites. You've got to be leveraging social channels, and you got to tie this stuff together in the cloud. Old on-premise type of solutions, things that don't API to each other, situations where you can't hand information effortlessly from platform to platform. If you have to do too much work to put together a total picture, of your buyer, you've already you're already doing the wrong thing. You've already got a problem. And so I am in fact advocating that you've got to invest in some new closed loop in the cloud technology. And that's a change because many people have on-premises instances of legacy CRMs and legacy sales routing platforms and old websites with real problems that still are not operating in the modern era. And I am saying you've got to change that, but all this stuff has got to be, rationalized. It's got to all move together, and you got to have a sense of what are the new programs you're trying to drive, what's the total process you're trying to drive, what's the new organization that you need, and then what is the technology. It's people, process, content. Those three have to be figured out before you can really have an opinion on how the technology is going to work. So I think back to your original question, Craig, this is pretty scary for a CMO. Everything is
Yeah.
changing. But what I think should actually be comforting is that we're no longer talking about a world where you don't know what effect your marketing has on closing sales and on generating demand. We're actually moving to a world where you have this very granular sense, this atomized sense of all the points of interaction, this matrix of conversations with buyers in the past that they're moving through. And you know exactly what that process is, who's doing what in that process, how to tune it. That's very liberating because now you actually have the vehicle through which to prove your impact on revenue, through which to participate and interact with your sales organization in a value-added way, and through which to actually talk about how that demand chain is something that you're helping to architect and improve. So while I think it's very scary and there's a lot of change that you have to go through at a people, process, content, technology level, the other piece of this is that it should be very liberating because you as a marketing leader finally are going to get control of what you're doing. You're going to finally have insight on what you're doing. You're going to finally know who your buyer is, how to engage with them, and how to optimize that spend on marketing to really get the most revenue out of
I'm not sure. I'm exhausted. That was so good. Um,
it.
no, I mean it. Thank you. I mean, that's like, I mean, I should just probably write this, transcribe this, write it up, and make this my ebook. Because I think I get it, and I like it. And I think yeah, it's amazing. I said this before. I don't want to be redundant, but it's like every time, I get really scared. I read your book. I was scared because it's really aggressive, right? It's new, but gosh, it makes a ton of sense. And so I can imagine how the CMO's reaction is when they get over it and they really dig into what you're saying. It makes so much sense. It does sound monumental, and it is, but it is it there's no way to, if you hold up the way we used to do things to the way you do things now, that you wouldn't choose what you're talking about here today. So
And
let's
it's not
yeah.
a 6 to 12 month change. I mean, it's we're talking. I will tell you that most billion-dollar plus enterprise organizations that I've worked with that go through this change takes 18 to 24 months. But I will tell you a great example is one client that I worked with, large technology hardware seller that primarily sells to enterprise, that primarily sells B2B. Their investment of definitely a couple $1 million in the change and the technology yielded identifying and driving nearly 85 million in new pipeline for their sales organization over an 18-month period as they started to build these bottoms up step by step. And that organization, as I said, has just been winning recent awards around their demand gen center of excellence. And so, I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm saying if you go through the program, if you actually follow through, the results are significant. And my resolve for how you have to approach it, how you have to fundamentally rethink things. The more times I see orgs go through this change, and the more times I see marketing leaders start to really get control of their environment, the more I'm emboldened to say, you know what, this is a painful process. It is, but you're going to be so much better off on the other end. That's absolutely worth it.
Perfect. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, Adam. I know that you're a busy man, and I appreciate you spending the time to talk to us. And so thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Craig, and always appreciate an opportunity. Anytime I can spend with the Funnelholics, always a good time. So thank you very much. And again, for marketing leaders out there, there's a lot to consider, a lot to talk about here. But I think that if you take a step-by-step approach, it's something that's imminently doable, and I've seen it done before. So, just take it one step at a time. That's what I would say for anyone.
Perfect. All right. Well, look, I just want to like that. It's again this just perfect ending. I'm not sure. I think I would say the same to you. There's nothing better than talking to Adam Needles. So, thank you again for your time, and for everyone here. Just keep in mind the goal here is to capture as much thought leadership content that we can that can help CMOs and VPs of marketing create a technology platform. And frankly, what we're finding is as we talk specifically about this technology platform, we hear more and more from the folks that we're talking to that this just isn't all about technology. That this is about a change of your view of the world and a change in strategy and a change in how you mobilize. And so that's really one of the biggest, most amazing takeaways from this whole project. And we'll see that more and more as you hear more from some of the other thought leaders. So again, it's Craig Rosenberg. I want to thank everyone for their time and look forward to seeing you again and look for our blog post and ebook in the near future. Thanks.